get to do a little AMA session here today with Gabi Barragan. How you doing, Gabi?
Hello. I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm wonderful. I'm unslept but feeling good.
Okay.
Always a pleasure. So we wanted to check in. We had some Ask Me Anything, a bunch of questions come in. We wanted to go through and kind of hit those. A lot of these, I was like, I want to ask these to Gabi. I know you had a couple that you thought were kind of interesting as well. So I want to see if we can just do a little bit of a, let's call it lightning round, where we're
Sure.
doing a little bit of a kind of back and forth. So first things first, which is always actually a really good one, is how do you personally keep up with AI, so to speak? What's on the watch, listen, read list, Reddit list? How do your picks differ from in your personal life, if at all, versus like what you're doing at work and when the money's flowing and stuff?
Yeah, so I definitely use AI in my personal life. Find it very, very helpful. Also, making sure to guard privacy. But when it comes to learning what's the latest and greatest with I wouldn't say that I have just one source. I use a lot of different sources. So whether those are email lists with either specific to the latest and greatest tech gadgets or thought leaders, even those that I disagree with, here's why this particular organization is maybe talking a little bit about vaporware versus reality. There are also a number of podcasts that address this, even if not from a technical perspective, certainly from a business perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So
Which ones?
I've just, a really popular one that is not necessarily AI focused is Pivot. So that's
Yeah.
with Scott
Kara Swisher
Gallagher
and
and Kara Swisher.
yeah.
Yes, excuse me, Professor Galloway. And so they are really looking at it from primarily a business focus, which is the same angle that I'm looking at it with. I'm not technical, maybe slightly know a little bit to be dangerous, but my big questions are around how are organizations going to convince their employees to adopt AI effectively so
Mm-hmm.
that there are actually meaningful changes to the business, the bottom line, and also workflows.
Nice.
And it's not an easy proposition.
do,
So,
you, do you actually dedicate time to that, or does it naturally kind of flow with your daily ingestion?
so let me just take a step back and say technology is great, especially when it works, but
Mm-hmm.
human behavior is a whole nother beast.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get meaningful change if you don't get alignment with people. And
Mm-hmm.
they have to believe that it's going to make their lives better. And they have to feel like, yeah, maybe I'm a little bit confused about this, but I feel curious and excited to go through some uncharted territory and try Copilot or
Yeah.
see what I can do here. And I do think that employers need to not hold the leash so tightly on employees and let them experiment a little bit, and not necessarily people with technical expertise, but people who are just curious.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's a steering committee, maybe there's an early adopter group that is just playing around with different tools just to see what they can do, because business leaders are not necessarily going to know themselves. And so if you've got people who are curious, whether they're 22 or 72, and they're willing to take the time and they've got the okay from senior leadership to do that, it's definitely a worthy investment in time and resources, because they also understand what's important to the business and how AI tools can meet that need. So I think that may freak some senior leaders out because it means less control. But I think we're at that point in time where you do need to have employees on the front lines helping to figure out how to use AI most effectively.
Nice. Heartedly agree. I'm trying to think if I can add to that. I don't know. I usually tell people this in private, but I don't know where it's going to go. So I sit there and very openly to my team, I go, I don't know what we're going to be doing in 5 years. I know it's going to be dramatically different than this. And we definitely set up and we try to make sure that we're grounded in foundational technology so that we can pivot and be able to basically adapt when a new model or something else comes out, right? When we focus at Wrench, we focus a lot on human to human communication because that can take many different forms, and maybe a new tool that's whatever will theoretically come in and take over that entire category. I haven't seen it yet. But I wanted to be ready for that. And for that reason, we went, okay, cool. We need to go in and we need to get a niche. And that was obviously like, hey, how do we get basically persuasive and preferred communication methods, but simultaneously, how do we make sure we can adapt? And so a big part of that is, one, podcasts. I've got piles on my phone right here.
Mm-hmm.
And that Scott Galloway, right? I've got his Prof G and his Radical Moderates and a Kara Swisher on there. And I find that oftentimes, even if you go through, because I don't know about you, I have way more podcasts than I do time, right? 1,
Yeah.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I've probably got 60 or 70 podcast subscriptions, but I don't listen to most of them. If I basically go look, there's so much free content now that a lot of it's garbage. So almost none of these podcasts gets a daily listen from me, right? I don't listen to every episode. I pick and choose and go through the ones that genuinely strike me as interesting. And so in that case, you'll see like weird stuff, like people that I think are good thinkers that study a specific subject. And when they're mentioning stuff very specifically about it, there's both sides, even political wise, because I was listening to political stuff on the plane here, where you're listening to like Steve Bannon's approach and his thoughts on it, Sam Harris's approach on the same day. Because you basically want to go, what do they think is going to happen in terms of how it influences and impacts job markets?
So quick note on that. I also like to hear the hot takes, but I don't find every single one convincing. So it's interesting to hear, okay, yeah, here's your angle. I understand where you're coming from. So at least when it comes to AI and how that's affecting the business world and taking it by storm, I like to hear the hot takes, but then I also like to see what's actually happening. And so from a anecdotal perspective, I work on different projects for a couple of different companies. So I have an interesting perspective as I'm seeing how different organizations are tackling using AI, convincing customers to use AI in their products, and how it's really shifting a lot of how people are thinking of working, even if they don't know what the answer is. And so I tend to combine the hot takes with what I'm seeing as reality, which is my own very personal, unique perspective. And that's where I start to kind of suss out who seems to be more right than wrong. And then those are the people that I tend to listen to a little bit more at 2x speed, hitting fast forward on the commercials. If there's something that gets covered in a podcast that I'm not interested in, time is precious. So like you, I want to stay in the loop, but there are only a certain number of hours in the day, and a lot of my time is occupied. So I am ruthlessly prioritizing what I listen to.
Well, and so I find that those are the ones that I can like dabble with. They can be playing while I'm doing the dishes or whatever else, or taking a walk and stuff. And I just go, cool, time is just passing. I need some not quite empty brain mode, because that's oftentimes like stressful. So I turn on the podcast to almost even calm the brain. The other two things that I'll do anytime we're either at a conference or something else like that, and I'm going through like the speaker lineup to see if there's anyone else there that's like very much worth meeting, and making sure that there's time there before we go. I'll follow them on LinkedIn, but also set alerts for those people, because there's a lot of those thinkers that are not doing just the I post every day religiously. I actually don't like those. I like the people that go, no, I post when it matters about things that matter. So there's the Jan LeCuns and the Andrew Ng and the groups like that, where I follow a lot of the technologists. They're oftentimes mostly on X. That seems to be where they're most active. And some of those you can get alerts for those. That way you click the notification via LinkedIn, email, or whatever. And then I decide if I want to click and read further. But at least now I'm a little bit more deliberately, I've been proactive so I can be reactive, right? Someone said something early and I get to know as quickly as possible. And I take a relatively same tact. We have a lot of Google alerts set up. So anytime we're in a field this is like the work version, but I have several different Google alerts set up for like agency plus AI type things, and a lot of those, so I can keep track when people are posting press releases for new technologies coming out. And then one other one, Allie, one of the team members here at Wrench, and I built an N8N workflow that goes on to Reddit, and it subscribes to about 10 different subreddits and does kind of the same thing. It filters through them for specific keywords, and then it runs like on a 3-hour basis, and it takes something that's several hundred posts a day and filters it down to about 20. That way
Nice.
we get really highly targeted, very early stuff. I think Reddit, as far as social communities, is arguably the most useful one. I
Uh-huh.
think that's where the most innovative people hang out. That's where the most
Yep.
behaviorally serious developer people are sharing their work. And it's easy to kind of like figure out who's good, who's bad, what's interesting, and what's not there. So those ones we go through and we check every day, if not every other day, just because it's now digestible. And oftentimes you can get a pretty quick read. So there's an innate in workflow with some automated filters and some keyword strategy stuff set up so that we can get a list and go, okay, cool, yes, this one, that one, not that one.
So the nice thing about that is it's obviously helping you cut through the noise.
Yeah.
And what I really like about Reddit is you're reliant on that written word, so to speak, not the
Mm-hmm.
glossy visual piece
Yeah.
of other channels that adds to the noise rather than actually helps you cut through it.
That's such a good point. I mean, you and I worked a while ago on what were they called? Builder.
Yes.
You remember those guys where we went through and we did like a podcast thing with them and we did some workshop stuff? We knew them and chatted with them for a while. And I was constantly going, well, how do you do this? What do you build? And they're like, oh, blah, blah, blah. They'd always kind of push you away. And then you found out later, like, hey, smoke and mirrors. They had a bunch of teams in India that were answering questions. They weren't actually really developing that technology significantly, right?
No, so what they did is they had a really nice, beautiful deck or set of decks.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they used as the meat and potatoes of what they were talking about. But as you and I both know, a slide deck is not the meat and potatoes of a true AI
Oh,
tool. And so, that's always going to raise a red flag, right?
yeah.
So on Reddit, there's no opportunity for that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I tend to take what people say in those subreddits a lot more seriously than what I tend to read on other platforms that I will not name.
Fair enough. Noted. It's worth noting too. That's one of the other nifty things about the Reddit stuff is that when they are bots, when they are someone that's faking that stuff. I mean, I've looked at other stuff that we were competing with, and like again, I saw the commercials, the content, or whatever else, and went, "Oh, that looks like a really, really, really interesting product." And then you go read the reviews or you look at the community on it, and people are like, "This is not a thing. It's a vibe
Yeah,
coded app.
this
It's serious
sucks.
enterprise software. Does not do what it's supposed to do. It's a head fake. It's they're doing this
But
to sell a agency package that isn't even automated."
here's the thing. Can you imagine someone posting on LinkedIn saying, "Hey, this beautiful new AI tool that I just released." Can you imagine getting flooded with comments on that post, or seeing on that post a ton of comments saying, "Hey, I tried this out. This blows." Or, "Wait, this doesn't make any sense." Or, "Wait,
Yeah.
where did you get the metrics that accompany your marketing on this?" That's never going to happen because there is a courtesy, which,
Yep.
there's nothing wrong with courtesy. But I think on Reddit, you're going to get more candid takes.
Mm-hmm. It's less of a professional atmosphere. It's more of a look. We're doing this. This is a
But you're
behavioral.
closer to the truth
Uh-huh. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
using critical skills as you are reading what you're reading. But yes,
Right.
I think it's a little bit closer to the truth.
Also a good point. I've actually seen a handful of people that did that a handful of times, rarely on LinkedIn, and it was refreshing as hell. Where someone just went, "Look, no, this is BS," right? Like it actually can. Maybe it should. Maybe we should instigate it, stir the pot.
you
Let's
know,
stir.
I'm not intending to be rude, but I do have to poke a hole in what you're saying here.
Uh huh. Uh huh.
Maybe that would be refreshing. I think certainly business leaders who feel a lot of pressure to either integrate AI into products that they are selling or to integrate it into their organizations, it's probably both of the above.
Sure.
They would probably welcome not exactly trash talk because we can be diplomatic and nice. In
Yeah.
fact, we probably need more of that. But
And it's hard. It's very
seeing
hard.
it's hard. But getting candid takes is pretty critical at this point in time because now not only do you have tons and tons of tools and platforms out there that use AI, but then the technology is also evolving very, very rapidly. So
Mm-hmm.
now it's hard to say, well, this tool that had a first mover advantage might be close to being obsolete now because something else has come out that's replacing it and it's only been a year. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a really confusing time. And then you hear a lot of the big names in the news, but what you don't hear are about all of the startups that are really ramping up and are also participating in this revolution, and you just never know when one of them or multiple of them are going to emerge and become respectable players themselves.
Mm.
So it's a really really interesting time, and that's why I think investing in people who, even if you don't have a lot of time, investing in people who are giving some realistic takes is really
Mhm.
important in
Yeah,
order to feel informed and like you might be able to make a really good decision for your own organization.
you dig it. Any sources or whatever that you've cut because it just wasted your time doing it?
Listen, I am not going to go to the big name publications. I tend to find people either on Reddit or on Substack,
Hmm.
or there might be some people who have some really good concise takes on TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, I'm not going to the New York Times or the Washington Post to get the latest and greatest on technology, even though they have some really great journalists who are producing some content. I am less likely to go to those big names than to like my portfolio of people who are more independent and maybe aren't subject to some of the editorial rules maybe that they would be subject to if they are working for a more notable
Gotcha.
organization.
Gotcha. Based on what you've been listening to, trajectory wise, what's got you excited slash nervous these days? It's been a minute since we did that check in.
What has me excited is that I'm actually hearing and I'm seeing that organizations are really taking this integration of AI seriously as
Mm-hmm.
far as changing the culture, supporting employees to use it. I think that senior leaders need to be a lot more open to that experimentation piece that I spoke about earlier,
Mm-hmm.
rather than absolutely mandating every single thing. Dear senior business leaders, your employees are already using AI. If you have not sanctioned the
Yeah.
use of ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, your
Yeah.
employees are probably already using them. Even
Mm-hmm.
if you're saying, say, this particular tool is the only one that we're going to use and you have to use it with these guidelines in mind, your employees are already using it.
Yeah.
And they're probably figuring out some cool stuff to do, but may not feel comfortable bringing that to your attention because it's not sanctioned.
Yeah.
So there has to be a bit of a permission slip for a contingency of early adopter employees to go forward with that experimentation and bring their results back to the table for consideration. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's like if I'm a senior business leader and I want to know what is the best way for us to use AI in product X, you know who's going to tell you the best way to use AI in product X? The customers that are using product X. They can tell you, hey, if you did this, this would really help. Or have you ever considered changing this particular module workflow because it would save us time? Those your customers can tell you how to integrate it if you listen to them, if you take the time to speak to enough
Mm-hmm.
of them, not just the ones who are on your cab or your customer advisory board, but everybody from the entrepreneur to the SMB to the enterprise level customer. They're all going to have hot takes, and you got to listen to them.
Hmm. I like that.
And I'm not seeing enough of that.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about companies getting wise to the fact that there are people out there who have the answers. You just have to be cool with listening. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't see enough of that happening.
Yeah.
How about you?
I like, for both good and bad, that I'm starting to see more skepticism. What I like is that I'm using it regularly. I'm getting my elderly parents, retired parents, to use it now, right? I've been working on a car with my dad.
Mm-hmm.
We made an AI agent that's like a personal mechanic, and he's fucking brilliant. You have no idea. Like a lot of this stuff, like this is like a kit car, right? So you kind of assemble a car, which means that there's enough of them, but it's not super, super common or super, super frequent. And there are forums, but they aren't very deep. And you can put a lot of customization into a car, at which point there's oftentimes not a map to follow that's great.
Mm-hmm.
And we made an AI agent that was a mechanic. I fed in the manuals and I fed in a bunch of like specs around the parts and stuff that we bought. And like there is a threshold, at least on that, where we crossed that chasm or whatever you want to go, where I go, I trust that thing more than I trust Google. It's right. And it's right in obscure little weird questions, again, where I'm like, it'll tell me the size of a nut on a specific bolt, on a specific part and stuff like that. I'm to the point now where it saved us a ton of time. It's getting more user friendly. Like we ended up building some tools that other family members and stuff have started using, just because in terms of being helpful, I cannot even tell you, like, the amount of research that we have to do to work on the car is more than the actual work on the car.
Yeah,
Oh
exactly.
man, it cut out half the work at minimum, just because you're doing so much back and forth going, well, I got this part, but it doesn't look like that part. They changed it since they made it 5 years ago or whatever. And so that's really good.
So this means that you can then do the part of assembling the car that you wanted.
Yes.
The reason you started this project in the first place was to work on putting this car together with your dad, not researching however many manuals or hunting for the right tool for a specific part. And so your time with your dad is limited. And the fact that you can focus more on that piece is huge.
Yeah.
And that's just one very powerful example of cutting out the crap so that you can focus on the human stuff with your dad.
The scary thing about that is realizing how many people don't realize that we're now in kind of the fluctuation where people know that it's out there, they're using it, and it can speed up a lot of these jobs by half, and or you can do a lot of these jobs. If you're below average, the AI, like in my situation, I go, is there better mechanics that are going to know tricks and stuff like that better? For sure, I'm sure. But simultaneously, I'm below average. So that thing artificially got me up to an average level, right? As far as I'm concerned, at least. And I think that's what a ton of other people are doing. But it is the other one that scares me is I don't think anywhere near enough people understand how significant mechanics are going to have issues, right? Like I did the same math. So after doing that, the brakes broke on my car, the couple other things on my truck. And I was just like, I'm just going to pull up this thing. It takes me less time to understand, learn, and fix my own car than it does to drive and then sit in the waiting room. So I can go, hey, I can cut my car expenses in half. It's actually kind of fun to do at this point. And I go, I don't think anywhere near people like you and I used to talk about how significant the disruption was going to be. And I'm continually a little bit nervous about how much bigger it is than people think it is. I go, it's going to come fast. And yes, I still think, at least for now, yes, someone with AI is more likely to displace you than just AI by itself. It still is dumb. We still check how many R's are in the word strawberry, and it still gets it wrong, ChatGPT. They still make really stupid mistakes like that are between reasoning and connecting the dots. But when it comes to summarization and simplifying tasks, teachers, and again, I thought the blue collar guys would be more safe, so to speak. And I don't. Again, it's one of those where I'm like, I think they're going to be more displaced than they thought. That's the part that kind of makes me nervous.
So the pushback here is that might be true. There might be some mechanics who find themselves without work because there are people who like fixing their cars, and now it's just easier to get the information to be able to do that. Like my brother-in-law is one of those people. I don't know that my husband is one of those people. So he's probably still going to go to his mechanic because that just is not interesting to him. Right?
Sure.
So I agree with you. There are blue collar roles that a lot of people probably think are pretty safe, but are also going to be impacted because everybody is going to be impacted. So what are those roles that are super, super safe? It's hard to say. We could probably say, hey, here are like 10 hairstylists. Now, obviously, we're going to get robots in the future, but I don't think anytime soon. So I also fall back on the fact that humans are social creatures. And I don't think, unless there are super hardcore introverts out there, which I'm sure there are, people still tend to gravitate towards other people. And the tendency is to want to build community, not like hide away from it. So I'm also excited about the potential for there to be more of a movement towards getting to know your neighbors, building your community, because it's a bit of a backlash against just staying home with your Nintendo or your Switch and not really participating in the world. So maybe AI will actually force us to participate in the world more. And how can that be a bad thing?
I
Does that
hope
make
so.
sense?
Yeah. I hope so. I mean, because I see both happening. Because like I don't know, you have yours, right? I've got Dan bot, right? I have my own personal assistant bot, and I fill him with a bunch of like research programs, documents. Anytime I come across a really good research paper or whatever else, that like I'll plug that into him. It helps me like collaborate and brainstorm papers. But I find that I talk to him a lot, a
Uh-huh.
lot,
Yep.
multiple times a day, at least, right? You know better than anybody that I'm absolutely horrible and always have been at typing, grammar, writing, and stuff like that, right? So a lot of the time I'm using it for like just grammatical changes and clean up XYZ passage and things like that. But I can see my kids come in and they'll ask to talk to my magic rectangle, right? I'll pull up the phone and we'll just do little like we're making little samurai masks. And I was talking to the boys about like, hey, where did the samurai come from and where did they get these masks? So we pull up the voice mode on ChatGPT and I hand it to them and they walk away with it and start talking to it like it's a babysitter, tutor, teacher, and they think it's a friend lady on the phone that they can hang out and talk to just like they're talking to you. There's a lot of comfort associated with that. They adapt to your style. They're obviously versed in what you want to learn here and now and everything else. I do hope that like what we use that for is creating almost an insulated bubble for ourselves. So like good news, I go, hey, you have access to all this information and you can digest it the way in which it's most useful to you, which should mean that you can learn faster and do a lot of things faster, get rid of a lot of the drudgery and research and stuff, right? I hope we use that to basically filter a lot of the noise. Like, hey, if I had to go search those 50 websites, I saw a bunch of shit ads and I got distracted 50 times by Google having 3 different ads in the top of search results. I hope we use that to go, well, this means I don't necessarily have to get on the web and go through those sites. I can just get the answer that I'm looking for unfiltered. And then I have more time to go outside, right? I have more time to interact
Yes.
with kids and stuff, right? I hope we're on that trajectory.
So you bring up the good part of the chatbot persona
Mhm.
versus the one that's been in the news more, where you have a chatbot persona who is like urging people to, do things that are not in their best interest. We won't go down that rabbit hole, but that's certainly a concern. If someone is young, impressionable, they could start a dialogue with the chatbot that
Gotcha.
suggest things that are not advisable,
Mm-hmm.
right? So what you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about is something that has safeguards built into it so that your kids who are young can still use it and learn, but they're not going to have any type of sinister experience, right?
Sure.
And so this is an argument for why it's important to build your own AI agent that's not reliant on other sources that may, I'm trying to use my words carefully
Go for
here.
it. You're too good at this,
I
but go
know.
for it.
Well, so if you were to build this in ChatGPT, okay,
Oh,
and you were not to give it guidelines and it just went crazy in talking to your
oh,
kids one
yeah,
afternoon,
yeah,
that would be bad. That's
yeah.
not advisable. And then also, like, do parents know what their kids are doing? There's
Mm-hmm.
always an argument
Sure.
for parents to be asking questions. What you're talking about is something that is built to be a more reliable and secure and safe resource for your kids. And I'm
So,
not sure how many people understand that that's possible. And you're talking about something that's being used personally, right? Samurai
mm-hmm.
masks. That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Halloween's coming up. It's a good time
Mm-hmm.
for the kids to learn about that particular time in history. But there's a lot of reliance from people who are using tools that are free, and they may not understand that they're still in the wild west, and that it's advisable to have something that is going to have your best interest in mind. And there are plenty of the parent companies that create these tools. They're really after more users
Oh yeah.
and
Oh, you
making.
are the product. People do not realize when they're like, "Oh, I only pay $20 a month." They're like, "You're not covering your own bill." Like they're still keeping your data. There's a big kind of argument for a lot of the companies that are developing those AI agents that I think is a big one is just the transparency into the agent use, what's being used, what tools are being called, what types of searches are being done, so that you can have a little bit of that oversight to it, right? We just built like an agent ROI report so that everybody in a workspace and the team, because they're dealing with adoption, right? Getting those teams to adopt that AI is a big deal. MIT had this report come out a little while ago, and they said like 90% of companies that are getting AI are planning on reducing their amount. I can't remember what it was exactly. I'm paraphrasing, so I'm going to get this wrong, but they're going, oh, they're not recognizing the ROI from AI.
Mm-hmm.
But then you go and you look into it and you read further, and they're like, well, they're using a bunch of disparate tools. It's like, well, if one person has an Anthropic and a DeepSeek and a ChatGPT subscription, and then they don't actually get or share or participate in the log consumption of what they were actually asking, there's no way to coordinate who's using what, asking for what. Can we store that knowledge? Can we help people bounce off of one another to understand how to do a better job doing that? So like an organization leader, I think you get into a lot of trouble. And I think a lot of those AI companies have not only just no incentive, they're disincentivized to give you that information.
Yes.
I think that's a bad idea and a dangerous one, right?
Yes.
I want them to have that information. I want them to know who's really using it at work, or who seems like they're using it but isn't, but that's probably an indicator that they're using a different of one of their own tools that isn't participating and able to coordinate with their other team members, right? One of the big things they were talking about is they basically said, well, they're not getting that ROI. But largely, they're not getting that ROI because they aren't coordinating their implementation.
Right.
They're not picking a tool. They're not looking at the data. They aren't putting people in charge that are actually trying to wade people into the deep end. They aren't having check-ins. They don't have good ROI metrics. They aren't putting KPIs down and then following them. It's like, well, yeah, you have a shit disorganized structure without metrics, and yeah, you don't get metrics that way. So the weird thing was on that thing when we drilled into it, because they were a big part of the hot topic, one of the questions on our list today actually was like making the ROI case for skeptics. Was like, well, MIT says people aren't actually getting ROI. Like, you need to go read deeper into that report. And it says disorganized companies with disorganized strategies aren't getting ROI. And when they started shifting to like, hey, we have specialized vendors for specialized use cases, they were likely to get that ROI. So it's like, oh yeah, bad management begets bad results. Weird.
Well, and another element of that, which is also on our script that Ellie put together here, is let's start with the data question first. Before even
go there.
looking at tools, what's your data situation? More than likely it's siloed. So
they all are.
What is the game plan for getting access to all of an organization's data in order to be able to clean it? Because inevitably it's going to need that, right? Mm-hmm. There's companies have a lot of data that is a mess. And so if you're going to have an AI agent that is working efficiently using all sources of data, you got to step back and look at the data situation first. And I'm not sure how often that's happening.
You remember we built a lot of the stuff at Wrench we built probably years ago, and then a bunch of the stuff that we had to build almost instead was largely because of siloed data, right?
Right.
We found almost literally and almost even without exception, and I'm not like us included, no one's data is as clean as they want it to be. It's one of those things where like you have to actively manage and watch it. And oftentimes, even when you're doing that, it gets challenging. Getting data sets to even chat with one another. I mean, there was like a 1 to 2 year period dealing with just getting data from different CRMs to align. Like, how do we get HubSpot and Salesforce to really connect with one another and work similarly in the same way? Which sounds stupidly easy. Like, how is that even a problem? And then you go, well, you find out little weird things like, oh, they both use the word contact and they use the word lead interchangeably. And a bunch of little tiny nuances like that are scattered throughout 1,200 tables throughout those deployments. And then you find out that, oh, everybody that uses both of those systems pretty significantly customizes their setup just for them, which is fine, except when you're trying to unify it or create some other global insight with a bunch of other models, or even other teams at the same company. And has been the biggest encumbrance. We'd be 10 years ahead further if there weren't just those data silos. And yes, everybody literally comes on board. They say one thing. I mean, it's one of those things that's expected, but they say one thing about their data, and then we see a totally different thing about their data. It is always a very different story. And none of them are none of them are misrepresenting anything. It's just, it is that hard. And once you really dig into it, you find out how messy and hard that can be. So,
well, first of all, I think you have a lot of businesses that are used to running really fast, right? And so
Mhm.
they want to run even faster with AI. And I think you almost have to do something that is contrary to what you think is the right thing to do, which is you need to just stop.
Mhm.
Stop, take a step back. What's the situation? Like, really, what is the situation before you can actually build a strategy and a game plan to move forward?
Yeah.
And so I'm just arguing for maybe you don't run super fast this week. You're literally working with your team of early adopters to take a step back and really understand and assess what the organization's data situation is
Mhm.
and the corrections that need to be made or the fixes that need to be made. Every organization is different before actually moving forward with the integration piece of how is everybody going to use a particular tool or set of tools or build an actual AI agent to ultimately make everybody's lives easier. So,
Mhm.
everybody has more time to go to therapy and get along better with each other at
Yep.
the end of the day.
Yep. Would agree. On that same note, I would say the stop, take inventory, and also start with kind of like mini wins. A lot of people try to boil the ocean. They
Yeah.
want to throw all their data in, and it oftentimes actually slows them down even further because then you have to make sense of this data set that for whatever reason probably wasn't going to be or should have been included in the first place for a reason. I can't tell you how we've had situations where we've waited literally months to get access to a client's data, like their own internal team who signed the contract and everything else couldn't get the data that was their data from another team at their own company, not even a third party or a vendor or anything else like that. Like they just couldn't, because of red tape and other things, get access to their own. So we kind of build a phased rollout type of approach. Agents are a really good part of that because you can start with nothing and then they're very much iterative. You can add instructions, you can add third party documents, then you can add initial and early data sets and first party data sets, and then develop them as you go. And I think that's how most people need to think of them, because a lot of them jump in, they're like, oh, we're an AI company now. And you're like, no, now you're battling with AI and you're faster, you're getting faster, you can do more, you can do more faster, but it doesn't mean that it's easy. It's a different, hard problem. It's a very, very challenging thing, but it's also simultaneously like addicting to the point where you're like, no, what I can do now, I could not have done a year ago, a month ago, whatever. And wading into that deep end once you get those is the right idea. Cause like we built a set of wrench products that are like the standard products where we're focusing on things like agents and affinities, like basically behavior, participation in a category, personality and personalization stuff, so you can adapt to someone's preferences. That stuff from our side, we wanted to build it because it would work on almost any data set. We could work with almost any client in any situation, make it work. Part of the way that we did that was with appending it from third party data sources that we were familiar with, that we'd seen work in multiple other situations. So we could go, okay, your data, you're going to come in, you'll have a handful of fields that are good for us. You're going to have stuff like job title and employer and employer description and stuff like that. And then you're going to have a bunch of mess as soon as we get into the transactional data. And
So,
that allowed us to get around a lot of it. And then we usually go, okay, go get your agents, go predict lead score, go predict personality, go develop some custom content. And then you'll see that you can iteratively adapt and throw in more things like product recommendations later, but don't try to just do them out of the gate. Most of the time, you're not ready for it. So,
okay. So let me give you an example of a situation. This was probably during the pandemic, I want to say. So it was like
uh,
about 5 years ago. And
um,
we had a specific email campaign that we wanted to launch. And we were looking for a specific audience in the customer database. We wanted to target director level specific roles, but we had specifics beyond just director level. And then we
mhm.
also wanted to throw some VPs in there, but again, more specific information around that as well. It was such a difficult challenge to pull together a list because every organization has different titles. So, to try and make it as easy as possible to pull from Salesforce, it was like, well, director of marketing, vice president of product.
Mhm.
But because there were so many iterations of titles slash roles in Salesforce, we had to come up with this lengthy list so that we didn't miss anybody. And I'm sure we did miss
Yeah,
someone.
yeah, yeah. That's a
Okay, so now That seems like it shouldn't be such a big problem,
Yeah.
but we ran into it over and over again. And I'm sure we were not the only organization then and now
Yeah.
that runs into that problem. So now you can actually use AI to make that piece a lot easier. So several meetings that I had with my team at the time, plus our Salesforce ops person, can now maybe become one 30-minute meeting to just make sure that we're all aligned on what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's just one stupid small example of how we don't have to deal with that challenge anymore. So if I came to you and I said, Dan, we have a list of 50,000 customers, I'm just making stuff up. And we really need to target not the C-suite because everybody's targeting them, but we really need to target this particular
Sure.
audience of directors and vice presidents.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a pretty robust data set. We have a new product that we're launching. So as part of our go-to-market strategy, we want to have a special campaign for current customers because we think that a subsegment are going to be really interested. So I went to you and I said, hey, how would you help us handle this problem? In addition to what can we say in the emails, what visuals should we have to like get above a 2%, 3% open rate?
Yep.
And then start building some pipeline for this new product. If I went to you and I said my first problem is figuring out who our audience is, because it's always the biggest problem, how would you handle that?
The people are way more wrong about who their new customers are than they think. So again, a lot of the time I say you have the data set of your known customers. You have actually the quick access to them. And what I've seen work really, really surprisingly well, like get triple digit returns on it in many cases, is subsegmenting your existing customer base into factions, right? So people oftentimes do personas. And I go, yeah, usually you're not doing personas that include people that aren't your customers. So most people and most companies will agree that they have at least 5 customer personas, right? Oftentimes, I know that sounds really obvious when you say it like that. But oftentimes when people come in, they think of it, or like if you go look at their retargeting strategies, they only have one. And I go, wait a minute. If you have all of these different personas that you guys just invested many cases, 6 figures or more in developing, why the hell aren't you tagging your existing population with those? Because it's really significant for us. You can do, and I know everybody has their own personas, but we have found that focusing on your early adopters, your late adopters, and granted, you can go earlier to influencers and you can go to innovators, you can go into like peers, is super, super, super useful because they have predictable and knowledgeable feedback that is going to be of a recurring nature. The early adopters are the people that already leaned into the beta product. They were less price sensitive. They were more willing to try new features. They were more driven by new features because if you think about it, the really, really common problem is that when someone comes to buy your product, they may have the right job title, but you don't know if they're buying it because it's initiative that they're driving or if their boss told them to buy it, whether or not they wanted to. And that is in every single client's data set. And if they can go in and even, I shit you not, even if you're B2B, they can oftentimes go to the sales team and go, okay, I'm going to describe, the early adopters love features, the late adopters just want discounts. Easy way to start and oftentimes really hard to do. But I go, if you even start developing that new product development strategy using that segmentation, you will be miles ahead because you'll start to understand what one group really cares about, which is usually the vision of your product and what it's capable of doing, with another one that's, I just want the lowest price per whatever. Just give me the damn discount. Don't call me and make sure it doesn't break, right? These are 2 totally different dichotomies in the same data set. Those 2, and they get more and more extreme as you get to the opposite ends of the spectrum. But one of the first things I would do is even if you're doing the same thing when you're doing adoption for agents in your own organization, if you're like trying to convert your organization into a more digitally driven one, you find the employees that have the same behaviors, which ones are really leaning into that product, that technology, and which ones are getting, and you get both. You go get some of both. You get a handful, 12 of each, small focus groups. You spend a month with them. And you go, I want to sit with this group that really loves it. And I want to ask them what really works well. And I want to get feedback of what they're trying and what tools they're using and how they're using it and how I could make it work better and what it should be doing in a year. And then you go to the other group and you go, what the hell is it going to take to get you guys to just try this? What are you so worried about? What is such a headache? Like, what do we need to get you over? What are the fears, the concerns, the pain points? that keep you from using it, and answer both of those questions, and your adoption internally will spike, your adoption and your product segmentation. I mean, I've had companies that literally were able to like quintuple their basket size using that strategy, realizing that like there are two different groups. Why the hell are we sending discount offers to people that will buy at a price premium? And why the hell aren't we selling and putting this other group into our beta program? Because they want to mess with the latest and greatest, and they're willing to put up with the bugs and tell us what we can do and improve for no extra cost, right? We won't lose the account. They'll look at it as a bonus. That is one of the first things I would do, whether it's internally in my own organization or if it's against my own client's customer list, to go, hey, what are we going to do first, second, third? Is go get and answer those questions, because they'll be unique in each situation, but they will give you a very cool list and roadmap of what your strengths and weaknesses are for your product and or your adoption or your whatever your initiative is to pull it in. I would do that first and foremost.
Yes. So just to be super clear, you're talking about behavior-based personas. And so you're not advocating that everybody get rid of their personas. You're still going to need your top 5 personas.
Oh, no.
But what you're talking about is introducing the framework of the behavior-based persona and how miraculous it can be to understand what is going to move the needle for people. Because the old ways of doing things, just relying on the personas that you've had for the last 5 years, maybe 10 years, is not going to cut it anymore. Just ask anybody who's struggling with demand generation these days.
No.
You got to look at behavior, and you got to look at personalizing outreach. And that's what AI can do pretty seamlessly and easily and quickly.
Yeah.
And we know that there's some good results that can follow from that.
Yep.
We can do a part 2, because I think that there's some stuff that's still worth conversing about.
Done and done. Let's do it.